disaccharide. Okay? Now, when biological molecules hook together, okay? When biological molecules hook together, they do so through dehydration synthesis. What does dehydration synthesis mean? Dehydration is loss of water. Synthesis means making a bigger molecule. So you lose water and make a bigger molecule. Okay? When you take bigger molecules into your body, you break them down through a process of, the opposite of dehydration synthesis is hydrolysis. Or hydrolysis means hydro is water, lysis is splitting with water. Okay? So up here in the board, okay, we're going to talk about it. I'm going to show you, but you got to keep in mind that everything I have up here in the board is a lie. Okay? So I'm going to lie to you right off the start. Okay? And then after we do that, I'll tell you the truth. Okay? The reason this is a lie is because you don't find glucose and fructose like this. Okay? In nature, it's not like that. It's unstable. That straight chain thing is just unstable. It's not going to exist like that. Okay, so we're going to do dehydration synthesis. So the bonding is going to be dehydration synthesis. Okay? So we're going to do what? Dehydration synthesis between an alcohol line, one sugar, and an alcohol and a corresponding sugar. Now dehydration synthesis means what? We're going to take out a molecule of water. So when we do that, we're going to lose 2 hydrogens and 1 of the oxygens. Doesn't make any difference. Okay. Now those 2 are bonded together. Now if I told you that this was a 3,4 glycosidic bond. What does that tell you? What does the 3,4 tell you? The carbon numbers. We connected the 3 carbon on one sugar with the 4 carbon on the other. Now the reason we're doing this, okay, is to get you used to that. When we talk about DNA synthesis, how is DNA synthesis? Which direction always? Hello? It is always 5' to 3', which tells you the carbons that are connected together. We just named the carbons on which direction it's going. Okay, now what did I make here? I took glucose and fructose together. In general, what did I make? A disaccharide. Or disaccharide means what? 2 carbon chain. Now notice, can I add another monosaccharide there? Yep. Another dehydration synthesis, and I make a trisaccharide. And I keep adding them and make a polysaccharide. Right? Now, glucose and fructose. When you hook those together, they make sucrose. Which sucrose is, common name is table sugar. Okay, when you take table sugar into your digestive tract, what does your digestive tract do? Sucrase is in your digestive system, which is the enzyme, but essentially it does what? Breaks it down by hydrolysis. You add water back across those bonds. Okay? Now, what are the formulas that I have up there? I've got 2 types of formulas. The one that's drawn out with the bonds is the structural formula. The one up above, C6H12O6, is the molecular. Now, those 2, glucose and fructose, have the same molecular formula, but a different structural formula. And so consequently, they're what we call what? Structural isomers. These are what we call structural isomers. Okay? Isomers have the same molecular formula, but a different structural formula. Same molecular formula, different structural formula. Okay, so when you take sucrose in, what happens? Just the opposite. We're going to add water across here. So now we have OH here. We have HO there. The only way your body can absorb sugars is as monosaccharides. You have to break them down. Okay? Okay, so in your text, they have this drawn. And once again, this is a lie because you don't see it. Okay, because it's unstable. To make it stable, this oxygen comes around and hooks to there, and consequently it looks like this. Okay, now this is also in your text. Okay, so the carbons that are numbered what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 are still 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But that is stable. That's how you find glucose in nature. Okay. Now, if I take okay. Now, so this is in your text. Now we're going to take two glucose molecules. We're going to do dehydration synthesis. So we're going to do what? Take water out. Okay. Now you tell me, what kind of bond did we form? The glycosidic, but it's between carbons number 1 and 4. So let's say 1,4 glycosidic bond. What did we form? With glucose and fructose, we formed sucrose. With glucose and glucose, we form maltose. Where do you find maltose? In various grains. Okay, wheat, barley, hops, things like that. If you can find an old-fashioned ice cream soda store, what's the difference between a milkshake and a malted milk? Other than about 500 calories. They take the milkshake and add malt to it. Okay, a couple teaspoons of malt to do that. Okay. All right, so notice that. So we're going to take that water out. We lose both hydrogen and oxygen. Now notice you still have what? At both ends of the molecule, you still have alcohols. So what can you continue to do? Add on more and more, right? So polymers, polysaccharides, glycogen, okay, when I say, okay, what's glycogen? In you, what's glycogen? It's also called animal starch. Where do you store glycogen? Muscle cells and liver. Okay. You go on a diet for you to lose weight, you've got to get rid of the glycogen stores. Okay. Now we're going to talk here. Okay. When we talk about vegetable starch. Which vegetables have a lot of starch? Potatoes, peas, beans, corn. Okay. Now, when we talk about glycogen, which is animal starch, okay, this is also in your test. Can you make a 1,6 glycosidic bond? I'm showing you 1,4. Can you make 1,6? Yeah. And if you look in your blue book on page 46, okay, it shows you glycogen, where glucose is coming up here and one and it's attaching. Okay, glycogen looks like what? Looks like if you look at your text, looks like a tree, looks like a shrub. Okay, because of the branching that's going on. Okay. Now, last thing. Okay, the other polymer then is cellulose. Okay, so when you take maltose in, what do? You have to break it down. You have to hydrolyze that and put it back to the original glucose molecule. Okay, now tell me one more time. Okay, what's an isomer?
Same molecular formula, different structural formula.
Same molecular structure, but a different structural formula. Now notice if I make this change, I'm going to switch this around. We're going to rotate this so it's up here. And consequently, I'm going to rotate this one so it's up there. And I still make a 1,4 glycosidic bond. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we're still going to do what? We're going to take out water. But now, I only do this two-dimensionally, so this bond looks different than the other bond. This is the bond that we find in cellulose. Okay? Can you break that bond? Can your digestive tract break that bond? No. Okay? Can deers and sheep and elks and cows break that bond? Can termites break that bond? What breaks the bond for the cows and the sheep and the elks are the bacteria that are in their digestive tract. When you eat cellulose, what do they call it in your diet? Fiber or roughage. Okay? Because if I backed up to your front door and dumped a truckload of celery in your front yard and you ate all of that, you'd still do what? Lose weight. Okay? If you had heart problems, blood pressure problems, that may affect you because the salt is in celery. But you'd lose weight because you can't break cellulose down. Okay? All right, so that's carbohydrates. Okay, so next we're going to do the big questions on carbs. Okay, so we're going to do the same thing. Okay. Go back over here. Okay, for looking at lipids, what's the function? What do we do? Stored energy. What's another function? In chapter 3, we talked about phospholipids and cell membrane. And here shortly, we're going to talk about some hormones. Okay? What elements make up lipids? Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, sometimes phosphorus. Okay? But remember, in carbohydrates, there's a ratio, right? 1 to 2 to 1. Is there any ratio in lipids? No, there really isn't. Except that what? There's a lot of carbon, a lot of hydrogen, and not much oxygen. What functional group? Carboxylic acid. Alcohol. Glycerol. Phosphate. The monomers over there are what? Fatty acids and glycerol. Okay, so I've drawn 2 fatty acids. Number 1, why do they call them fatty acids? It's an acid because it has a carboxylic acid on one end. It's fatty because it has a long carbon chain. Okay? Now the top one that I've drawn up here is what kind of fatty acid? It's saturated. What does saturated mean? What it means is the carbons are saturated with hydrogen, and consequently you have single covalent bonds between the carbon atoms. Okay? So this guy is saturated. It probably means then that this guy is unsaturated. Meaning that what? The carbons are not saturated with hydrogen, and consequently you have double covalent bonds between the carbons. Okay? Where do we get saturated fatty acids from? Animals. Lard, butter, things like that. Generally, at standard temperature and pressure, they're solid. We get unsaturated fatty acids from plants, right? Corn oil, safflower oil, peanut oil, olive oil, all of that. At standard temperature and pressure, they're generally liquid. Nutritionists like us to eat unsaturated fats because they're a little bit more unstable and consequently easier to break down. Okay? Now, what's a trans fat or a saturated fat? Nutritionists really don't like you to eat trans fats or hydrogenated fats because you take unsaturated fats and you bombard them with hydrogen and make them a saturated fat. Okay? And consequently, it's more stable. They're more difficult to break down, so you end up with more plaque in your bloodstream and makes your arteries smaller. Okay? The best example that I can think of hydrogenated or trans fats. Best example. Remember that unsaturated fats are normally what? Liquids. Okay? Double stuffed Oreos. If you take the two cookies and you have unsaturated fats, you put oil in there to stick the two cookies together, that doesn't work very well. So they use hydrogenated fats, which is a solid then, to hook those together. Okay? Nutritionists obviously don't like you eating hydrogenated or trans fats. All right. Now I'm going to get rid of the unsaturated fat here for a second. And then we're going to talk about bonding. We're going to do dehydration synthesis. Okay, so we're going to do dehydration synthesis up here. We're going to take out a molecule of water. Okay. We're going to lose 2 hydrogens and 1 of the oxygen. Just like that. So that's an ester bond. What did I form? What did I make when I hooked that fatty acid and glycerol? Not a triglyceride, but a monoglyceride. Okay. Now, I'm going to abbreviate this thing. I'm not going to draw that whole thing. So if I take the second fatty acid and do dehydration synthesis, okay, now what did I form? A diglyceride. Okay. Now, if I take another one of these, and take water out there. Okay, now I form a triglyceride. Triglyceride means what? 3 fatty acids and glycerol. How many ester bonds? 3. Okay. Now, in this case, I formed what? A polysaturated fat. If you look, if I do the molecular formula, okay? Now that triglyceride molecular formula is that, which I told you is what? Fats have a bunches of carbon, bunches of hydrogen, and very little oxygen. Okay, and we talked about triglycerides are what? Hydrophilic or hydrophobic? All that carbon and hydrogen makes them extremely hydrophobic or non-polar. Okay? Now, I'm going to switch this a little bit. Now, instead of a fatty acid, I'm going to put a phosphate there. And what are we going to do? Dehydration synthesis. I'm going to lose that molecule of water. Now what kind of bond? A phosphoester bond. Okay. And then once again, what I made here then was a phospholipid. Which molecules do you see phosphoester bonds in? We've already kind of mentioned them. Phospholipid, nucleic acid, and adenosine triphosphate. When we break those phosphoester bonds, there's a lot of energy released. Okay. Put your text. In the 10th edition, in the blue one, it's on page 75. And the orange one, and the orange one's 48. I'm not sure that's it in the blue book. On page 49 in the blue book. Okay. Included in lipids are steroids. Now in your text on what page 48, 49, whatever, okay, what are some examples of steroids? Cholesterol, estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, cortisol, so on and so forth. Okay? Which three organs in your body produce steroids? Produce steroid hormones? Which three organs in your body produce steroid hormones? There's only three. Two of them are fairly easy. Ladies, ovaries, gentlemen, testes, and then the other one's the hard one. What other organ produces steroids? The adrenal cortex, the adrenal gland. There's only those three glands that produce it. Okay? Now, why are steroids considered lipids? They're non-polar for sure. Once again, all those points have carbon and hydrogen. Okay, so steroids are considered lipids because of lots of carbon, lots of hydrogen, and not much oxygen. Okay? Now, in addition, their function is slightly different. If I took a regular cell, if I took a liver cell or a kidney cell or something, as a nucleus here, those three organs of your body have insulin receptors. And they're cell surface receptors. When insulin's released from your pancreas, what does it do? It attaches those insulin receptors and then allows glucose to go into the cell. Insulin is a what we call a hypoglycemic agent. It lowers blood glucose. Okay? People with diabetes mellitus do what? Don't produce insulin, so they suffer from hyperglycemia or high insulin. Okay? Now, most hormones that are not steroids work in that manner. Steroid hormones work completely different. Okay? In that steroids work because of what we call cytoplasmic receptors. Now, we've already said that what? Steroid hormones are hydrophobic or non-polar. So they go across the cell membrane fairly easily. And then they attach to the cytoplasmic receptor, okay? So the steroid hormone and the cytoplasmic receptor hook together, and then where do they go? Into the nucleus. Okay? And cause the nucleus to divide. Okay? Now, what are anabolic steroids? What are anabolic steroids? Anabolic is the opposite of catabolic. Metabolism is breaking down. Anabolic is building up. Okay? What are anabolic steroids? Testosterone is an anabolic steroid. If people are on anabolic steroids, okay, what do they look like? Their muscles get big. Okay? And you tell people that are on anabolic steroids, it's getting tough to tell because not many people are doing them these days. Because they figured it out, it was stupid. Okay? But what happens? The muscles got big. Because muscles have cytoplasmic receptors for testosterone. What don't have cytoplasmic receptors are bone cells, ligament cells, tendon cells, and all of that. So the muscles got big, but then when they contracted, there was no support system, and they did what? You ripped tendon, you ripped ligament, you broke bone. In some cases, does the heart have cytoplasmic receptors for testosterone? Yeah. The heart got big, but what happened? It got big, but the walls didn't get thick. And so they died of cardiac aneurysm. In other words, the heart just burst. Okay? And do that. Now, okay? So steroids are extremely powerful. Okay? How many of you have had a cortisol injection? Any of you? Why do you get them? To reduce inflammation, which in turn reduces pain. In a calendar year, how many cortisone injections will they give you? 3 maybe, but generally only 2. If you're on an oral steroid, prednisone or some of those, they give them to you for a while, and then what do? You just don't stop oral steroids. They wean you off so that your body will start producing steroids again. Okay? If you start taking steroids and then just stop, your body doesn't start up producing them again. So they wean you in little bits, so your body starts making steroids again. All right. Now, out of this, on next Thursday, exam 3, I'm going to give you some molecules that you're going to have to be able to recognize. Okay? Glucose, polysaccharides, okay? Steroids, phospholipids, things like that. I'm going to give you the molecules, and you have to be able to recognize them. I'm not asking you to name them, but you have to know what they look like and what the bonds are. Okay? So on exam number 1, there's going to be a figure with molecules on it that you have to identify functional groups. There's also going to be a table there that you're going to have to identify molecules. Okay? Whether it's monosaccharides, triglycerides, phospholipids, steroids, or whatever. On Tuesday, we're going to do proteins and nucleic acids. Okay? Then I'm going to go over the exam with you. The exam is 80 multiple choice questions. Okay? So I'll go over it. Generally, it's divided into 3 sections, which is divided chapters 1, 2, and 3. Okay? All right, so we'll do that on Tuesday, and then I'll show you some sample questions. Okay, the kinds that are on the exam. Okay? Any questions? All right, if you have lab today, I'll see you over there in a little bit. If you don't have lab today, you've already had lab. I'll see you next week. Have a good weekend. Stay warm.